Under the shade of a weeping ash tree sits a man in red and blue military attire. He's 62 years old, with a protuberant belly, stout shoulders, and a broad, dignified moustache. Despite his age, his stocky build gives him an imposing figure, reminiscent of a bull, which is only complemented by the smartness of his uniform. His eyes are very blue. To his detractors, he's remarkably pig-headed, perhaps even a little dim. To his supporters, he's cool and imperturbable, a natural leader. The bullion thread oak leaf embroidery around the black band of his kepi indicates that he's not just a common soldier. He's a general, and not just any general, but the commander-in-chief of the French armed forces. First commander of the Grand Quartier General, Joseph Joffre, has paused for a quiet moment with his thoughts. The date is September 4th, 1914. For the past month, France has been under invasion. The Germans have pushed so deep into French territory that they are now just 30 miles from Paris. Last month was disastrous for the once proud nation of Louis XIV and Napoleon Bonaparte. August 22nd, 1914, is still the bloodiest single day in the country's history. 27,000 Frenchmen had lost their lives by sundown. 329,000 total casualties for the month. The daily casualty rate for August was higher than any campaign of Napoleon's, higher than any battle that will be fought in the Second World War. It is death on an unprecedented scale. This man, Joffre, is partly responsible for the slaughter. Throughout August, Joffre had stubbornly refused to believe intelligence reports, stating that the main German attack was coming through Belgium. One of his generals had warned him of the danger, but he had ignored these warnings. The military governor of Paris had also warned him of this. These warnings had also been ignored. The press have dubbed Joffre a generalissimo, partly to indicate his superior status in the French high command, partly to mock his stubborn and unyielding personality. Halfway through the month of August, Joffre was finally willing to admit that there were over 15 German army corps in Belgium, but he still refused to believe that they would swing west of the Meuse River. He was wrong. Instead of concentrating his forces in the north to stop the German attack, Joffre ordered his own attacks through the hills of Alsace-Lorraine and through the knotted forests of the Ardennes. The price of this folly was quick and punishing. The French left flank collapsed. The two armies that had been holding down the left, the British Expeditionary Force and the French Fifth Army, have just retreated over 120 miles, hounded by 3 German armies along the way. Panic is setting in. Civilians are fleeing Paris in droves. Perhaps as many as 100,000 have already left. 2 days ago, on Joffre's recommendation, the government evacuated the capital as well. The situation is dire. French Army headquarters has been crammed into a boys' schoolhouse in a small village called Bar-sur-Aube. The din inside the schoolhouse has reached a fever pitch. The lines are buzzing with urgent telegrams. Staff officers shout orders over telephones. Confusing and contradictory intelligence reports are being debated. And all this clamour is taking place in the miserable heat of summer. The stench of dozens of sweaty men, some coming, some going, some dusty, some exhausted, permeates the schoolhouse. This is why Joffre has stepped outside. As the wind blows through the leaves, a terrible decision weighs on him. Form a defensive position south of the River Marne, along the Paris to Verdun line, or take a bold risk by asking already exhausted soldiers to counterattack the Germans and, hopefully, catch the invaders in a moment of unexpected vulnerability. Joffre's first instinct has always been to attack. He has been steeped in a doctrine which asserts that the offensive is not just one method among many for waging war, but a dogmatic necessity. For a commander not to attack is as much a moral as a tactical failing. To quote the Field Service Regulations, issued in 1913, returning to its traditions, The French army accepts no law in the conduct of operations other than the offensive. Battles are, above all, moral contests. Joffre had overseen the writing of this manual. He had appointed the officer who wrote it, and he had given his official blessing to its final publication. The problem is that this religious obsession with the offensive has not brought the promised salvation. Like all true believers, Joffre is having a crisis of faith. There had been great casualties in August, but those were expected. In war, that is the price of doing business. What Joffre had not expected was the massive French retreat. The old general simply cannot square what he had preached before the war with what he is seeing now. Going inside HQ to check the maps one more time, Joffre studies the position on the left flank with trepidation, and then, without speaking to anyone, he leaves and returns to the shade of his ash tree. In his mind are 1,000 solutions, but there's one problem he can't quite figure out. What is he to do with the British? Although not as critical of the British as some of his subordinates, Joffre refers to his left flank in polite conversation as fragile, meaning, of course, weakest, wherever the British Expeditionary Force is. The French see the BEF as plodding and timid. The British, in turn, see the French as reckless and wasteful. Questions hang over the British army that the French commanders find very unsettling. Is it possible the British are thinking of withdrawing their army? Will they abandon France in her hour of need? For the past month, Joffre has had to use every means at his disposal to keep the BEF in line. He has pleaded, taunted, flattered, and requested London to intervene once already. But for how long will the British hold? He's not sure. And the most infuriating part is that the BEF is now positioned at the most important part of the line. By some fluke of chance, the British are the ones best poised to exploit the problems that have occurred between the German First and Second Armies. But will they do it? This counterattack is crucial to Joffre's plan, and this plan is the last means the Commander-in-Chief has to salvage an increasingly perilous situation. If this gamble fails, France will surely lose the war. As Joffre rests under the shade of his tree, over a mental chatter of conflicting timetables, railway schedules, and reconnaissance reports, one question nags at him without a satisfying resolution. What is he to do with the British? At 6 o'clock that evening, Joffre makes up his mind and rises with a solemn determination to fight, come what may. He goes inside the schoolhouse and orders his operations bureau to draft orders for the armies to support the Paris garrison in their action on the French left flank. The date of the attack is set for September 7th. The Château du Jard is an elegant 18th century mansion, fenced in by stone walls and carefully manicured trees. It's owned by a local lawyer who has graciously decided to host General Joffre and his staff, allowing the French commander-in-chief to use the stately home as his residence during his time in Bar-sur-Aube. Joffre is a creature of habit. He insists on taking his meals at the same time every day, whenever possible. Talk of strategy or the war's events is normally forbidden over dinner, but tonight there are 2 Japanese officers in attendance, so the rules have been relaxed. The war is taking its toll on the officers gathered around the table. Dark circles around their eyes, intermittent coughs, and inexplicable nervous conditions, such as tics, headaches, and bright auras, are not uncommon. While his exhausted troops eat hardtack and corned beef, Joffre insists that he and his staff dine on gourmet meals. Tonight, they're having one of Joffre's favourite dishes, Brittany leg of lamb. The Generalissimo eats so vociferously that even if conversation were allowed on most days, it would be impossible to get a word in. As he chews the sumptuous meat, Joffre contemplates the strategic situation that has bothered him all afternoon. The Germans have had the upper hand for over a month, but now it seems they're overextended. They have marched into a salient, with its neck running along a line from Paris to Verdun. The German right flank, originally the strongest part of the line, now seems to be the weakest. Attrition, exhaustion, and logistical shortcomings have left the German First and Second Armies in a sorry state. Aerial reconnaissance has confirmed this assumption on multiple occasions. Earlier today, Joffre ordered the retreating armies to halt and prepare for a counteroffensive. Now all he must do is think of how to carry out the attack. The Germans might be overextended, but they're still deadly. For days, Joffre has juggled units from the relatively deadlocked eastern frontier to the west flank. The French Sixth Army was cobbled together from the odds and ends of failed August offensives. 7th Corps had been poached from 1st Army, 4th Corps taken from 3rd Army, while the 55th and 56th Reserve Divisions were taken from Joffre's failed offensive in Lorraine. Paris reservists have been thrown in for extra manpower. Thanks to France's skillful command of interior rail networks, now the French Sixth Army, around 150,000 troops in total, waits outside Paris, ready to pounce. Gallieni, the military governor of Paris, and Joffre's rival for the title of Commander-in-Chief, has already spotted the weakness on the German right flank and is pushing 6th Army forward. And Joffre has another ersatz army up his sleeve. The 9th was also pieced together from the odds and ends of other units. Its role will be to tie down the German 2nd and 3rd Armies, while the armies to its left exploit the weakness of the German flank. With these two new armies, Joffre knows that he has the advantage on the all-important left flank. He also believes implicitly in the French soldier's spirit, or élan, to brave daunting odds. But how does a commander convert these advantages into a victory, especially when the adversary is the most potent fighting force in the world? Joffre knows that the margin of error has narrowed to a very fine point. Suddenly there is a disturbance outside the dining room. The polite conversation is broken. A dusty officer enters with an urgent message. On most occasions, Joffre would violently resist any interruption to his meals, but today the stakes are too high to cause a fuss. The man is an envoy recently arrived from 5th Army. Previously a corps commander, Louis Franchet d'Espèrey, has been commander of the French 5th Army for not much more than 24 hours at this point. Short, stocky, and dark-complexioned, Franchet d'Espèrey was given 5th Army because he exemplifies the relentless energy and aggressive instincts Joffre wants to see in his officers. The envoy explains that 5th Army is in a rough state, but will reach the River Orc by tomorrow. Joffre looks visibly pleased when the envoy explains that the BEF have agreed to march alongside the 5th for the counterattack that's being planned. Before the officer is even finished speaking, a telephone message arrives from headquarters. Franchet d'Espèrey has wired 2 notes with details for the attack. They await Joffre's perusal in his office. Joffre smiles. He replies tersely, in his soft-spoken style, "Then we can march." A look of relief comes over the staff officers gathered around the table. For weeks, this is what they have wanted most, to feel as if fate is in their hands again. The retreat is no more. France's pride has been on crutches for the past month. Now, it's time for the nation to stand on its own 2 feet again. After excusing himself early from the meal, Joffre retires to examine the plans laid out by his general. He must make sure they're consistent with his own tactical vision. He's not stingy with his praise. Both during and after the war, the Generalissimo will admit the debt of gratitude he owes to Franchet d'Espèrey for making this counterattack possible. At 10 in the evening, Joffre puts the finishing touches on his plan, known as General Instruction Number 6. Originally, the attack is planned for September 7th, but Gallieni, the military governor of Paris, persuades him over the telephone to push the attack forward a day. Joffre will later come to regret this decision. He orders 6th Army outside Paris to cross the Orc River and attack in the general direction of Château Thierry. 5th Army is to advance northeast to strike the German 2nd Army. 9th Army is to guard the right flank of the 5th around the tricky Sangon marshes. The BEF is to march in the direction of Montmirail, attacking into the overstretched German 1st Army. As much as he hates having to rely on the British, Joffre has no choice in the matter. Like a slow-growing tumour formed by some chance exposure to radiation, the British have lodged themselves in the weakest part of the German line. Joffre has no ability to command the BEF what to do or where to attack. It is, after all, a foreign army. All he can do is make very strenuous suggestions. Although Franchet Desperé claims to have secured the BEF's cooperation, Joffre knows how mercurial their commander is. The ironically named Sir John French neither likes the French, nor is he much liked by them in return. This is why it's not too surprising when, just an hour or two after issuing his orders, Joffre receives word from the British that they need time to restudy the situation and thus cannot join the attack. Joffre is flummoxed. In less than 48 hours, the battle for the survival of France will begin, and the British are in the most pivotal location along the line. They cannot simply opt out of the attack like a rugby team flaking out on a schoolboy match. Because the orders need to be encoded and dispersed, the specifics of General Instruction Number 6 will not reach the Allied armies until tomorrow morning. To help persuade the British of just how crucial they are to the success of this plan, Joffre sends a special envoy by motorcar with a copy of the details to British General Headquarters so that they can read it without having to wait for it to arrive by cable. The envoy arrives at British headquarters in Melun at 3 in the morning and discovers, much to his horror, that all 3 corps of the British Army are retreating by night march. They are withdrawing further away from the front. This attack is in danger of failing before it even starts. The next morning, September 5th, at around 9:15, a telephone message arrives at French Army headquarters. The British offer a tepid agreement to comply with General Instruction Number 6, but state that they won't be able to reach the area specified in the orders. Joffre reacts ambivalently to the news. He messages back that he will pay a personal visit to British headquarters this afternoon. Without wasting a moment, the commander wires a separate message to France's Minister of War, Alexandre Melun, who is with the civilian government in Bordeaux. A moderate socialist, surprisingly, Melun has been supportive of Joffre's autocratic manner of conducting the war. He has, so far, done all he can to support the Generalissimo. Joffre informs the minister that the strategic situation is excellent and that French troops will fight without reservation. But the old soldier knows that war can be a fickle mistress. He adds, hedging his bets, "The struggle in which we are about to engage may have decisive results, but in case of a reversal, it may also have very serious consequences for the country." Next comes the real reason for his message. He asks Melun to put backdoor diplomatic pressure on the British to join the attack. He writes, "If I could give orders to the English army, as I could to a French army in the same position, I would immediately order an attack." This is unambiguous language. Joffre cannot legally order the British to attack, but he would, if he could. After dashing off this telegram, Joffre tells his staff to ready the automobile. His personal driver, Georges Boyau, is a 2-time Grand Prix winner. Despite being only 29 years old, the racer can easily be mistaken for 39. He's a man who has lived life on the edge and loved every minute of it. Boyau joined the French Aeronautics Service when war broke out, but someone in the War Ministry must have recognized the racer would be more useful on the roads than in the air. There is no better man in France to drive 65 miles per hour down winding, dusty roads, medieval in design, riddled with potholes, many without signs or labels, while sometimes under artillery and rifle fire. Over the past month, Joffre has put his loyal driver to the test. The Generalissimo is notorious for making unannounced visits to his commanders in the field, sometimes to issue orders, sometimes just to observe how his officers conduct business in the heat of combat. Joffre has already dismissed 2 army commanders, 10 corps commanders, and 38 divisional commanders. These surprise visits help Joffre gauge the mettle of his officers. On the agenda today, however, is not a conventional field visit. French headquarters is being relocated to Châtillon-sur-Seine, giving Joffre time for a longer journey than usual. As Joffre squeezes his bullish frame into the back of the open-topped Panhard staff car, he tells Boyau the destination. The journey today is to Melun. The racer shakes his head anxiously as he studies the map. Melun is nearly 120 miles away, and the roads around there are crisscrossed with German cavalry. Joffre is aware of the danger, of course, but there's no alternative. He must speak with the British, and Melun is where the BEF's general headquarters is located. 2 staff officers and Joffre's personal aide cram into the car before departure. As they embark over the treacherous roads, the engine hums, the seats rattle, and the old general kills time by reflecting on the war so far. France's commander-in-chief is still committed to the holy dogmas of the offensive, but he knows now that the central tenet of this faith, that the fighting man's spirit is sufficient to achieve victory, is wrong. Artillery support is what makes or breaks an attack. This means logistics has taken on greater importance than in previous eras. Getting shells to the right place, at the right time, and in the right quantity is more crucial than ever before. Likewise, the coordination between artillery, infantry, and aerial reconnaissance adds up to something much greater than the sum of its parts. He's starting to realize that in this new style of warfare, combined arms attacks are much more potent than blind bayonet charges. Waylaid by roadblocks and the obligatory French lunch break, Joffre and his staff arrive at British Army headquarters at 2 in the afternoon. They are ushered into the chateau of Vaux-le-Pénil, which is the residence of Field Marshal Sir John French. Joffre enters a small room of the chateau's main hall. Inside are just a few British officers. The atmosphere is tense and stiff. Everyone is standing. Sir John is in the centre of the room. The Field Marshal leaves most who meet him with the impression that he would prefer to be out in the field, riding horseback with a sabre in his hand, reliving his glory days in South Africa, rather than dealing with the tedious necessities of high command. Despite being several years younger than Joffre, Sir John looks harassed and exhausted, perhaps realizing in his heart, although not consciously articulated, that he's out of his depth. Joffre not only insists on having gourmet meals whenever possible, he also demands a full 8 hours of sleep each night. This might explain the Generalissimo's remarkable stamina over the past month. Sir John, on the other hand, looks like a man in need of a shave and a good night's sleep. Perched over the corner of the table, facing the high windows that open onto a scenic park outside, stands Sir John's Chief of Staff, Archibald Murray. The sullen officer is always bristling with complaints and impossibilities. He seems to have a chronic allergy to decisive action in the field. The French High Command suspects with good reason that Murray is one cause of Britain's frustratingly timid action. Standing to the right of Sir John is the gaunt figure of Henry Wilson, Sub-Chief of Staff. From Ulster Protestant aristocracy, with ties going all the way back to William of Orange, Wilson is fluent in French, favours aggressive warfare, and has always been quite amenable to French military schemes. There has been a great ratcheting of tension between Wilson and Murray behind the scenes. Murray sees his Anglo-Irish counterpart as an upstart, trying to steal his job. Wilson sees his boss as not up to the task. Like a devil and an angel perched on Sir John's shoulders, each man gives wildly divergent advice to the field marshal. Joffre does not know it, but the BEF's decision to join the attack at 9:15 this morning, as tepid as the assurance was, came largely from Wilson's advice. The night retreat had been Murray's idea. The BEF is suffering from a problem that had until recently afflicted the French army as well. Too many factions vying for control over how the war should be fought. Joffre had solved this problem in his own ranks with a sweeping purge of the commanders he deemed too defeatist. But the Generalissimo, as powerful as he is, has no authority to purge the British army. In fact, even if the British army were subordinated to the French, Sir John, a field marshal, technically outranks him. That is why Joffre has journeyed the 120 miles to Melun, to make sure that men like Wilson prevail over men like Murray. Joffre removes his cap and sets it on the table. He faces Sir John. With a soft-spoken, monotonous voice, he thanks the field marshal for agreeing to join the attack. The fate of Europe hangs on this decision. Sir John bows politely. Joffre proceeds to explain the strategic situation, how the retreat led to the current arrangement of armies, and how the German First Army has been stretched in two directions, with the right flank facing Paris looking especially weak. At this point, Joffre breaks off his narrative to butter up English pride. He thanks the Royal Flying Corps for playing a vital role in spotting the reduced troop numbers on the German right flank. British flyers have helped make this counterattack possible. Sir John, whose French is spotty, indicates to his staff that he has understood and needs no translation. Joffre proceeds to explain the massive preparations made for this counterattack, how whole army corps have been shifted east to west by rail for days to build two new armies from scratch, and how mountains of shells have been delivered so the artillery can fire withering, relentless barrages. The Germans, he says, are stumbling blindly into disaster. Their dusty columns of grey soldiers are waltzing deeper into the trap as we speak. Joffre can see the faces of the British staff, especially those who speak French, starting to look tensely at Sir John. They're finding inspiration in Joffre's words, but they're wise enough not to let it show. Next, the Generalissimo shares the message he intends to relay to his troops, a message aimed, no doubt, at the British staff officers as much as at the French soldier. The time for retreat is over. Those who cannot attack must die where they stand. No more ground can be yielded, not even a single foot of French soil. Joffre can feel his passion running away with him. Although his voice has remained calm, emotion is percolating through the words. Speed is of the essence, he says. Even a few hours' delay can upend the whole operation. He thanks the British again and says that their role is the most important task of all. He cannot believe the British Army will fail to do its duty in this supreme crisis. With his hands clasped tightly, like a penitent in prayer, Joffre says, "France is begging you. Please, Field Marshal, the honour of England is at stake." All eyes look at Sir John. This appeal to the old cavalryman's honour has worked. The Field Marshal's eyes are glimmering with tears that slowly dribble down his cheeks. He stumbles through a few lines of mangled French, but then turns to one of his staff to say, in English, "Damn it, I can't explain. Tell him all that men can do, our fellows will do." Joffre's English is as spotty as Sir John's French. He glances at Wilson, hoping for a translation. The Ulsterman shaves down the message to its barest simplicity. The Field Marshal says yes. But Sir John's tears demonstrate the sincerity Joffre sought with a face-to-face meeting. He knows his speech has struck the right chord. Archibald Murray knows it too. The sullen officer intervenes at once to dampen the mood. He reminds everyone that the BEF is 10 miles short of where the attack is supposed to begin, and there's no way the army will be ready to attack by 6 in the morning tomorrow. These things can't be helped. Joffre says with a shrug and a conciliatory hand. Let them start as soon as they can. I have the Field Marshal's word. That's enough for me. The British are taken aback. They had experienced already the heavy condescension French generals display whenever they feel frustrated or impatient. Joffre knows, however, that managing English pride is crucial to Allied success. The meeting is concluded. They break for tea to ease the tension. After taking care of a few details with French liaison officers attached to the BEF, Joffre departs Melun for his new headquarters, confident that the British will fight tomorrow. What he doesn't realize, however, is that complications are starting to occur east of Paris that are threatening to ruin his carefully constructed plan. It's noon, approximately 25 miles east of Paris. Soldiers of the French 14th Infantry Division are marching in their conspicuous red trousers and blue coats along a charming cobblestone road lined with poplars. They are positioning themselves closer to the German flank for the 6th Army's attack tomorrow. Suddenly there is a loud whine and a thunderous explosion along the road. Then another and another. The French soldiers scramble for cover. They huddle in ditches and crouch in tall grass, trying to find cover wherever they can. The officers take stock of the situation and realize that this rain of shells is coming at them from German 77mm cannons on the heights of Monthyon. The German 4th Reserve Corps, camped slightly north of and at a right angle to the rest of the German flank, had spotted French troop movements earlier that morning. The German commander ordered 2 of his already depleted infantry divisions into a wooded ridge around the area. Their orders were simple: attack any troops coming from the west. Now that the French are within range, the Germans have unleashed fire. The battle rages over hedgerows and farm fields. The mustard, wheat, and clover fields are trampled or set aflame. Beautiful slate-roofed farmhouses, many inhabited by the same families for centuries, are blown apart to deny cover to the enemy. This is not a pock-marked moonscape one is accustomed to reading about in the battles of the First World War. This is a pristine landscape being spoiled for the first time. There are no trenches or dugouts. Troops of both sides are caught out in fields, ditches, hedges, or behind fences. For hours the bodies pile up. One German artilleryman, hiding in a small wood, describes the battle in a letter home. Sharp cracks behind us, ahead of us, and above us. Shrapnel, one after another, rains down on us. We run from one large tree to another. Countless wounded and dead lie all around us. The battle rages until dark. The exhausted 4th Reserve Corps holds off the French 6th Army at great cost, but crucially, it prevents the 6th from reaching the Orc River. The element of surprise has been lost. Worst of all for the French, their counterattack has been revealed a day early. The German First Army had already started to pivot back to support its right flank, but now that it knows an attack is coming in earnest, it will spare no effort to swing the entire army north. By tomorrow, the French 6th Army will not be facing a piece of First Army, but the whole thing. Joffre's plan has been compromised. The French 6th has been caught out of place chiefly due to the influence of one man, the man who in no small part made the counterattack possible. The military governor of Paris, Joseph Gallieni, is 65 years old. He's tall, bony, and with a white moustache that droops down slightly over his upper lip. Staring out from a ubiquitous pince-nez, his eyes are scrutinizing and intense. He regularly dresses in full military attire, giving him the commanding appearance of a military ascetic. He is very much the opposite of the soft-spoken and portly Joffre. About a decade before, he had been Joffre's commanding officer in Madagascar. The two men had not seen eye to eye. In 1911, Gallieni was originally offered the job of Chief of the General Staff, but refused it in the end. It was offered to Joffre only after Gallieni refused. Matters were made particularly awkward when, on the cusp of war, the government declared Gallieni to be Joffre's replacement, should the commander-in-chief be killed in battle, or perhaps bring unsatisfactory results. Finding his rival too difficult to work with, Joffre made Gallieni military governor of Paris, hoping to give the firebrand a prestigious enough job to satisfy his pride, while still keeping him out of the way. Rumours circulate that Joffre did this to safeguard his job. But Gallieni is not the sort of man to stand aside quietly. When aerial reconnaissance spotted that the German First Army had left only a single corps behind to guard its right flank, Gallieni wasted no time. He immediately started preparing for an attack. Although Gallieni is not the commander of the French Sixth Army, because the army has been dispatched to defend Paris, he is, in effect, the commanding officer of the general in charge of the Sixth. Gallieni ordered the Sixth Army to position itself northeast of Paris, and later to march against the German flank. He did this on his own initiative, without first consulting his commander-in-chief. Gallieni was the first to contact the British with the idea of this attack. Likewise, it was Gallieni who demanded over the telephone that Joffre move the date of the attack forward by a day. For his part, Joffre had also spotted the weakness on the German flank around the same time as Gallieni. Although both men agree on the strategic soundness of the attack, they have quibbled over the details. Joffre will later accuse Gallieni of prematurely initiating the attack. In his memoirs, Joffre will insist the attack should have commenced on September 7th. Gallieni will say later that his attack seized an opportunity that would have vanished if they had delayed. After the war, a sea of ink will be spilled by scholars, arguing over whether Gallieni or Joffre is most responsible for this battle. One point is not disputed, however. The ultimate responsibility is Joffre's. It is he who has readied the armies, and it is his head that will roll if the plan fails. Although his hand has been revealed to the enemy, Joffre has no choice but to attack tomorrow as planned. All he can do now is hope that he has a better set of cards than his adversary. He does not know it yet, but there is one silver lining to this dark cloud. As the German First Army frantically wheels around to cover its right flank during the night, the gap between the German First and Second Armies that previously had been snapped shut is in the process of being reopened. It is guarded only by thinly spread cavalry units. It should be easy for the French to break through this gap. Joffre should feel relief, or at the very least, some satisfaction, but there's none forthcoming. The problem is, once again, that slow-growing tumour that has lodged itself at the critical point. This lightly guarded section of the line is where the BEF are slated to attack, and the British are notoriously slow attackers.